Live from a NASCAR bunker in Kyle's parents' basement, it's Turn the Radio Off with Mike Parsons and Kyle Bauer.
Turn it off, turn it off, turn the radio off. Don't you know we're turning into zombies? Turn it off, turn it off, turn the radio off. Try to know yourself for once in your life.
Become a fan at Facebook.com/TTRO Show. Follow along on Twitter.com/TTRO Show. Or just listen right now. It's Turn the Radio Off.
And if you couldn't tell by both Kyle and I taking turns coughing during the open, something is definitely going around.
Wait, that was, they got picked up on the mic?
Your first one did it, and then since you did it, I felt comfortable doing it myself.
Oh, well.
I can never tell if my voice sounds better or worse when I'm under the weather.
It's got a very warm tone.
You
to
think
it.
so?
Yeah.
Wow. Earlier this morning, I sounded like Lindsay Lohan after a night of boozing. You know, that naughty girl rasp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, kind of the unintentional vocal fry.
Right. Well, good, Kyle. I'm glad that you validated me because I feel like my voice sounds fantastic when I'm under the weather, but it always sounds different played back than you hear it in your head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've never liked my own voice. It's really
an acquired
I can't
taste.
stand it. Oh God, it's so nasally.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot better in my head because
Right.
it sounds way deeper in my head.
Right.
Like
It's-
to my own ears, it sounds like 2 octaves deeper.
It's sort of like when you're singing along to something in the car in your head. You sound just like the person you're singing along with.
Uh-huh.
But if you were to record yourself playing back, that would not be the case. To put it lightly.
Yeah, probably.
Well, we are. I feel like we are through the looking glass, Kyle. And before we talk about Donald Trump governing like a supervillain, because essentially that's what he's been doing this first week, and it's hard to give him a chance when he's signing all these executive orders that really just seem to be aimed at pissing off liberals and people who voted against him in the election. We'll get to that a little bit later. But first, I guess maybe we'll get to the silver lining in all of this. What turned out to be the biggest organized protest, I'm not sure if it's said in world history or in U.S. history, but the Women's March on Saturday. And it looked like things were off to a rough start on Inauguration Day when quote-unquote anti-Trump protesters, who I just figured were anarchists and people who like to cause chaos when there's an opportunity to, started throwing garbage cans through storefronts in Washington, D.C. A lot of people are saying, here we go again. Look, you see, you don't see conservatives doing this, blah, 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 blah.
Because they're all too old to.
Right.
That's why they can't get up off the couch.
They need their anarchist grandsons to help them lift the garbage cans and throw them through the glass. But I do have to say that, it seemed like it might have been cause for concern with the bigger stage protest on Saturday, which fortunately that was the polar opposite of what happened at the hands of a small group of people on Friday. The protests on Saturday were large, they were organized, and they were peaceful. And I was glad that my Facebook feed was filled with 2 things that day. Obviously, the people shitting on the protests. And the other thing my Facebook feed was full of were pictures from the protest. Pictures of people getting along. Pictures of protest signs and protesters and police getting along. And then, of course, later on, the people who were shitting on the protest, they found pictures or videos of a couple of the idiots who were there trying to delegitimize the cause. There's news of Madonna talking about wanting to blow up the White House all over the news feed. But, there's a lot to digest with this large protest. And I think the big question everybody wanted answered was, what was the aim of this protest? It started off as a women's rights march, but it seemed like it got bigger than that. it seemed like it was mostly an anti-Trump march, and people who felt that we are entering a dystopian era in U.S. history, and how they're not standing for that. And I think they just wanted to be heard and seen in big numbers.
There were a lot of layers to it, and that's both a good and bad thing. It's a bad thing because, again, there wasn't a centralized message. If you could distill it,
right,
it would be down to what you just said. It was just basically an anti-Trump march, rejecting this government. But there are a lot of other layers to it. There was Black Lives Matter, no pipeline. No, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Trump
More
went
on
ahead
that.
and showed them afterward.
More on that later.
Yeah, but it was more than just women's rights. Obviously, rights for refugees and immigrants. It was all encompassing, and I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing, in that you want there to be a focus, you want there to be demands, you want there to be an essential message, and there wasn't really any demands made.
Right.
And I don't know if that's because there was just too much to go around, it became too big, or if it's because they didn't feel that there was needs for demands to be made. One thing that I've also been hearing, and this is really frustrating, and you know what I say about liberals and progressives. Now, they always want to be the smartest person in the room, and they'll fight each other to the death for it.
Right.
2, never discount a liberal's ability to think themselves into a corner.
Right.
Okay, and this was something that kind of ended up happening in the, I guess, afterglow and then backlash of the march. It went from, we did it, this was a great achievement, this was so... Suddenly, you got these women saying, well, where were you women before?
Right.
Where were you men before?
Right.
How come you're just now joining this when it's trendy? How come you weren't protesting for Black Lives Matter the same way you're protesting for this? How come you weren't doing this? How come you weren't doing... Why were you so cheerful at the protest? What were you celebrating?
Right.
And,
So what happens is people start eating their own.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
They're not as concerned. You're not as concerned about the cause as I was, or it's like the old punk rock bands in high school. I was for this cause back before it was cool and back before it was trendy. You poser.
and I got a question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the NRA lobby doing that to each other?
Nope.
Do you ever see men's rights activists doing that to each other?
Nope.
I'm not saying that. I'm not blaming women. I'm not blaming minorities. I'm not blaming a group of people who want equality and are all clamoring for it desperately. What I am blaming is just the whole progressive movement in general to never find a damn focus. They never can, because they're all trying to outsmart each other when they all need to be working together. And instead of coming out of this march saying that, okay, well, yeah, maybe we didn't have a central message, but you know what? We're going to have a march for the climate now. We're going to have a march for Planned Parenthood. There's one all over the state on Saturday. You say we got this, and this. We're starting to make some movement. Instead, no. I get a bunch of, pissy think pieces and Jezebel and Slate shaming other protesters.
Right. I'm more concerned than you are.
Don't. And this is, again, coming from a very skewed perspective, because straight white male here who didn't even march because I had to work, I donated instead. Take what you can get and move with it. You're talking about inclusiveness. Encourage inclusiveness. Don't shame or discourage first-time protesters.
Right.
And when I see that, it almost makes my blood boil as much as everything that Trump is doing and everything that the Democrats aren't doing, because it's a sign that these people aren't mature enough to lead this movement. We need galvanization. And instead, we got people picking each other apart,
right,
and getting pissy with one another.
Well, and that's what you need. You need central leadership, and it seemed like there was some kind of leadership there, because there were organized protest routes, and those routes, the protests got so big they had to reroute it. So it did seem like there was some kind of central organization to a point, but the question is, okay, so you pulled off the largest protest in the nation's history. Now what? And really, I don't think there's much you can do right now until the midterm elections. But you have a good start, right? You have all these people, these millions of folks who showed up to march, and a lot of them will probably show up to march, pat themselves on the back, and not think about it. But with the people you have, there needs to be a person or a group out there trying to capture this momentum, whether it be email lists or whether it be follow this account on Twitter and somehow keep people engaged from now until the midterm elections. Because these next 2 years are going to be very turbulent if you're not in favor of Trump's policy, because he's got the supermajority. He's got the majority in the House. He's got the majority in the Senate. He's signing executive orders like they're crossword puzzles, and the only way executive orders get overturned is by 2/3 congressional vote or the Supreme Court. So what you have to do is you have to keep this fire. You have to keep this spirit of opposition going until the midterm elections in 2 years. And really, to me, that's the only thing I see that would make these protests effective and not in vain.
Continuously show dissent. It's the only way. We need to keep the fervor going, and we can't fold to the establishment on the right or the left,
or the people, or the people who are, as you say, Kyle, first-time protest shaming, whether it's from within or from without. And I got into some debates with folks over the weekend because, look, like I said, I didn't know what exactly the purpose was for this march, but I applauded them for their organization. I applauded them for their numbers, and I applauded them for their ability to be heard and remain peaceful. And you saw it, you see it when Black Lives Matter is out protesting, or Occupy Wall Street, they're out protesting. People are saying, first of all, oh, you could protest, I don't care, but don't get violent. Okay, so they don't get violent, and they protest in another nonviolent way, like blocking a freeway. Oh, blah, blah, I don't care if you protest, just don't block a freeway and don't get violent. But at that point, you're no longer a protester, you're a thug. And so we have the largest peaceful protest in the nation's history, and these same people who said, "Oh, I don't mind if you peacefully protest," sitting here and moving the goalpost. One of my conservative friends posted a picture of Jim Brown, and it said, "If activists are found in the streets and not on Facebook," and I commented with, "Well, there's a lot of activists on the street today." It's the Women's March, and there's millions and millions of people out there. And then someone else commented with, like, "Those aren't activists, those are marchers." And I said, you know what? It's really amazing how people change definitions based on the fact that they don't agree with the message.
And it's the type of distortion that we're seeing, to the point where we're now into alternate facts, and,
right.
and nothing is real anymore.
That's why I said we're through the looking glass. We're entering this bizarro dystopia.
People are literally customizing their own reality,
right,
to what their ideology is, and it's frightening.
Well, and these people who are crapping on the peaceful protesters from the Women's March. If this was 5 years ago and that was a Tea Party rally, those wouldn't be a bunch of sore losers, Kyle. Those would be patriots.
Exactly, and that's what these people are.
Right.
These are patriots. These are people who want to... This is
what the First Amendment was written for.
Exactly, and these are people who want to see this country work for them as well as it works for the majority. They want to see equality. They want to see their rights being protected. They want to see themselves represented. And there's nothing wrong with that. To me, that's saying you just want a better country. You want a better society for you and yours. And it's not even about political differences when you're talking about stripping voter rights. It's not any political differences when you're talking about silencing certain branches of government and wiping away facts and data about global warming or climate change. We're to the point where objective truths, objectivity, is being thrown out the window. And you could say that it's been building up to this for a long time, but I think it's finally arrived. There is no truth anymore. There's no facts anymore. And you know what? Fucking conservatives killed it. And I know that I'm kind of debasing my own point of view by saying objectivity's out the window, but follow me here.
All right,
who started the fake news shit? I know in very rare instances, there's Occupy Democrats and
right.
U.S. Uncut and stuff. The left
what do you mean by
their group too, but
I guess define fake news, because obviously The Onion has been around for a while, but The Onion makes it know that it's satire. You're talking about the half-truth spun into propaganda.
Not even half-truths.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Pizzagate.
Yeah.
Talking about stuff like that. This was all propagated by the right. It was, and the far right. And it spread to people who were so unsettled that a black man was in charge of their country with the name Barack Obama.
Hussein!
That they were willing to believe anything
right.
to validate their fears.
And you know what? These are the people who say, the mainstream media is trying to brainwash us, and then they believe the first propaganda piece from AlanWest.com or the Daily Courant or what have you.
And they pushed it and they pushed it and they pushed it until you got to a point where you can say, well, how do you know that CNN isn't making it up?
Right.
Well, how do you know that this isn't the truth and what you're reading is the truth?
That's a very dangerous, slippery slope, Kyle. And let's shelve that for a second, because I want to hit that first after the break here.
Okay.
Let's turn the radio off on the internet.
Less rock, more talk. Turn the radio off.
Become a fan at peoplehatemypodcast.com.
Attention! Your gym teacher escaped from charm school. Irons his underwear. Watches hygiene films. He says, anyone chewing bubble tape owes me 50 push-ups. The lunch lady wears a hairnet. Serves mashed potatoes with an ice cream scoop. Puts gravy on everything. She says,
bubble tape is not part of a well-balanced diet.
Bubble tape. It's 6 feet of bubble gum. For you, not them.
So, let me repeat your order here. That'll be 1 double cheeseburger, ching. Large fries and a large soda, ching. 2 kids meals and 2 medium sodas, ching. 1 chicken sandwich, large fries, and a vanilla milkshake. Bada bing. That'll be $62.75. We're a little shy.
Remember when you could feed your whole family fast food for less than $10? Well, at Rally's, you still can. Rally's has it right.
Switch off the radio. Turn off the radio. Shut down your radio system.
We'll do it live!
What?
I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Turn the radio off. There you go. I'm drunk.
All right, before we hit the break, Kyle started describing this sort of shock and awe that we've been experiencing when it comes to news sources. Like you said, Kyle, for a long time, but finally on Sunday, with Chuck Todd, Kellyanne Conway, inadvertently gave it a name, alternate facts. And to most people's credit, they even a lot of my Trump supporter friends glommed onto that as a not only a BS propaganda word, but something that is setting a dark precedent. And the Trump administration has a strategy here. What they're doing is they are trying to paint the media as liars and propagandists. And the funny thing about that, Kyle, is constantly blaming the media is a very it's like propaganda 101 in itself. Number one, it suggests that the media is one solid unified voice that's not splintered off by ideology, by different people within the media organizations. You know, the media is not just one conglomerate that has that's spewing out one message. It's very diverse, and really, depending on what your political affiliation is, you can find a media source that corroborates it.
And there are also media sources that are beholden to journalistic integrity. They have to. It's in their ethics, it's their job description, and if they fabricate a story, they're fired.
Right.
Or if they plagiarize, they're fired. And that's the Associated Press. NPR is another one. And people want to put NPR on a slant all the time. And I know Trump
wants to put it out of business.
Right. And you wonder why. I remember throughout the whole campaign, Trump refused to give an interview to NPR. He did not give one interview to NPR. All the other Republican candidates did, even, schlubs like Ted Cruz.
Right.
But Trump refused to. You know why? Because, one, you can't see Trump on the radio.
Right.
That's the first reason why he wanted to give them an interview. Second reason is Trump, I think, knows that there is no spin, there's no distortion, and there is a vast amount of intelligence and digging done behind every question, nuance behind every question. I think he didn't want to face it. I think he was scared. He knew that it just could not be spun. And that's why NPR is important. That's why a basic source like the Associated Press is important.
Right.
That's why the New York Times has become important. Calling Trump's voter claim that there was illegal immigrants voting, that right there, they called a lie right in the headline.
Right.
And because that's what it was. And you could call that spin, but that's a fact. And that's why I'm going to continue to rely on these sources and only these sources.
Until its funding is cut.
Well, the Republicans went after NPR back in 2012, and it didn't work. It's not going to work this time.
I hope not.
I hope not either, but NPR is bigger than conservatives realize. If they step out of their bubble, they'll realize that. But Mike, I know you're itching to get in here, but I'm going to make one last point on this front. That I now more than ever am progressive. I haven't always been.
Yeah.
Just a couple years ago, I would still think I leaned more towards being a moderate, being a pragmatist, even having some libertarian point of views and principles. But as I've seen the way that conservatives have taken, being a moderate, centrism, taken being a libertarian, and how they have just, in my mind, just destroyed what those words mean and what those affiliations mean. What they meant doesn't really exist anymore, at least not as we knew it. So I now consider myself a progressive more than ever because I'm seeing more BS than ever from the right. And I could go to U.S. Uncut and read about how Bernie Sanders is going to become our president by some loophole in the Constitution on March 31st.
Right.
Okay? I could go to Occupy Democrats. I could even go to the Huffington Post, which at times has been caught fabricating shit to make the right look worse, which is hard to do. But, I mean, point being, I could go and get my slanted news or my fake news, but I don't even need to do that because I have the AP, I have NPR, I have the New York Times. Guess what? They're not going to do that. They're going to report the facts, and they're going to report the truth about this administration, and it's ugly enough.
Well, I think it's also a very pivotal we're at a pivotal point in time when it comes to news outlets. Number one, I think what news outlets have to do is they need to ignore the noise. All this noise of, the inauguration numbers started off as just noise. It's like, okay, well, who cares if Barack Obama had more people at his inauguration than Donald Trump? He's still the president. But then Donald Trump has made it a thing because it hurt his feelings, and he's been on the warpath over it. Or, hey, look, Michelle and Barack are so much more in love than Donald, Melania. Let's just cut through all that crap. It's noise. It's high school burn book crap, and it's distracting from the actual issues and these executive orders that he's signing and affecting potentially millions and millions of people with these executive orders that nobody's going to challenge. Number two, I think they may need to take some time out to explain what they cover, how they cover it, and why they cover it. A good friend of ours from college, Steve Stager, he works out in Denver now as the news anchor, and he's part of this new experimental news magazine show called Next. And the anchor on it, Kyle Clark, he started one of his recent newscasts with an explanation about the difference between covering. Remember that Russian leak that came out that. It had a bunch of stuff in it, but all people glommed on to was the potential golden showers that Donald Trump enjoyed with Russian prostitutes.
Yeah, which is already dust in the wind,
right.
By the way. I mean, who remembers that?
Right. Well, Kyle Clark said, look, as a news organization, we didn't find it responsible to report on those salacious, unverified details. But what we did find responsible to report on is possible business and political ties that our president might have with the Russian government. Mm-hmm. And he explained he explained the difference between the two of them and how they cover these stories and why they cover them. And I think that the media, or the news organizations, need to do this, because what Donald Trump is doing is he gets his feelings hurt, and then he gets on Twitter and he gets on his bully pulpit and he tries to bully journalists. And not only that, he tries to brainwash people against journalists. So I think journalists have to fight back, and they need to speak up for themselves, and they need to not be intimidated. And if Donald Trump is going to pick and choose who he lets into the White House press room, then the people not in the press room, they need to just do what they do. They need to report the way they're going to report, because if they're not in that press room, Donald Trump doesn't have a chance to explain himself.
And you're right about that, Mike. And one thing in NPR's coverage of that leak a couple weeks ago was they would preface it with that either it was unsubstantiated or we won't be covering the salacious aspects of the leak.
Right.
And that's what good news journalists are doing. And there's a lot of that out there if you look for it, but you need to be going to the right sources.
Right. What gets reposted is the clickbait and the garbage.
Like BuzzFeed.
And the celebrity gossip crap. That gets put out there saying, oh, look, look, Donald Trump, he's got small hands. Well, okay, you know what? There's a lot to criticize Donald Trump over than small hands or his kids or his wife. Leave the family alone until the family does something messed up, and let's focus on how he's trying to turn back the clock in this country.
And not just turn the clock back. I mean, we're looking at, I think, a worse nightmare realized. A lot of people thought I was being melodramatic on election night and subsequently. But I wasn't, Mike. Well, I read shit. I pay attention.
Right.
I know what's... And you know why? Because I try to stay away from all that static.
Right.
Okay? And I'm not saying that makes me better than anyone. I'm just saying I saw this shit coming. And what is really, really disheartening to me is that I thought he would recant on a couple things.
I thought he'd moderate a lot too.
I thought he was still going to be dangerous. I thought he was still going to be a threat in many, many ways. And I didn't actually think he would go through with the wall and this soon. And that when I saw that when he was oh boy, I can't remember, but there was that one document that they...
Well, you know what? Hold that thought, because I actually want to get to some of the executive orders that he has already signed in his first week. So I'm going to take a break, rack your brain, see if you can remember what document you're talking about. We'll come back, and we'll break down the executive orders that he has already signed into action. It's Turn the Radio Off on the Internet. Let's try that again. It's Turn the Radio Off on the Internet.
Turn the radio off with Mike Parsons.
No drug dealers living next to me. Pretty good deal.
Kyle Bauer.
Yeah.
People hate my podcast.com.
It's sometime in the future. The ultimate challenge. Crossfire. Crossfire. You can count. Crossfire. Crossfire. You can count. Crossfire. 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 You'll get caught up in it.
What exactly is it that makes a Ford Escort GT so much fun? Well, let's start with its powerful 16-valve dual overhead cam engine. It's a blast. A scream. It really cooks. Then there's Escort GT's great looks. You know, the kind that'll turn more heads than a screwdriver. Speaking of turns, that's where Escort GT's nimble sport suspension comes in. We're talking road hugging. So ask yourself, isn't it time for a little fun? Yes. And have you driven a Ford lately?
Turn the radio off. Tell your friends about us. Make them like us on Facebook.
I am not sure if we are broadcasting properly.
Turn the radio off. Online and worldwide. TTROshow.com.
All right, so Kyle, I'm in the camp of let's give Donald Trump a chance as president, but it's kind of hard to give him a chance when he seems to be governing like a pro wrestler trying to get over as a heel.
Well, he was actually a heel in pro wrestling. That's why.
Follow. You made me genuinely laugh, and I'm fighting this guy. Right, exactly. Why should we be surprised? You know, we elected Vince McMahon, and we're all of a sudden we're surprised when he goes, "America, screw you, you're fired." But these are just the executive orders that I know of that he's signed. And you could probably fill me in on any ones that I missed. The first executive order he signed was rescinding mortgage relief for people with FHA loans and breaks on taxes, helping low-income folks buy houses more affordably, which is how we bought our house, by the way. So that actually that actually made me take notice. An FHA loan is a low-interest, low-down payment loan that you get, and it's got to be backed by insurance because you're not putting a whole lot of money down. But the Obama administration passed laws to make that less expensive, giving more people a chance at home ownership. And for some reason, the first thing that Donald J. Trump did after his swearing-in ceremony was sign an executive order to get rid of that.
Well, I think that's an interesting one because, again, it targets people it targets housing. Elizabeth Warren, by the way, the most disappointing, I think, person on the left this week. She's been voting through every Trump, every confirmation hearing. She's been voting yes on, essentially. Yeah. Co-signing this dangerous and unqualified cabinet. One of the people was Ben Carson, and she was really pushed to defend that vote. And already you see this executive order. I mean, and the idea was that Carson was going to be focused on helping low-income people.
Yeah.
That he was going to be helping to empower HUD. Why would you believe that for a second?
Also,
and then this executive order happens. How fucking dense can... And I say this with incredible bitterness and disappointment,
yes,
because Elizabeth Warren is supposed to be one of the leaders of this new wave.
Right, she's supposed to be one of the progressive heroes.
Exactly, and that was a huge letdown, and it really shows that sometimes Democrats have this total gullibility or spinelessness.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it, I could call it both. And you know their willingness to get government in motion. No, do what the fucking Republicans did.
Right.
You know, lock up the Senate hearings. Okay, the confirmation hearings. Vote no. Okay, push the dates back. Do whatever you can do to cause gridlock. That's the only way that these people who have the actual power to cause direct resistance can cause resistance, and instead they co-sign everything.
And you know what? Actually, that's the way government was designed. Government was designed for gridlock and to move slowly.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, obviously the Republicans worked that strategy with perfection and completely tarnished a lot of what Obama was attempting to do.
Right.
Well, now you have somebody. We're staring fascism in the face right now. We're looking at potential tyranny. Okay. Stop it. You have the power to stop it. You can't stop these executive orders, but these Senate... I'm sorry you got me off on a tangent about these Senate confirmation hearings and how the Democrats are just rolling over again.
What
the fuck is wrong with these people?
Here's what I don't get about Dr. Ben Carson's appointment to being the director of housing. The first cabinet position that he was being considered for was Surgeon General. That made a lot of sense to me. Okay, I don't agree with him politically, but he was a brain surgeon. He was head of brain surgery at Johns Hopkins University, so obviously he's a very qualified doctor. He turned that position down because he said he didn't have government experience.
This is all,
and then he becomes the director of housing and urban development. It's like, wait a second, you've got no experience in that. You've been a top brain surgeon for years and years and years. That would have made a lot of sense.
He's a figurehead. He's a figurehead while they completely dismantle housing, and they stack the deck worse against minorities and low-income people than it was back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Okay? HUD was put into place to stop this shit.
Right.
HUD was a civil rights act. Okay? Now you're going to have an administration that has already taken a step in the first 5 days to gut it. Of course, there's other executive orders reinstating the Muslim registry, which did exist under George W. Bush, was ineffective and costly, but it promotes fear.
Right.
Banning refugees from certain countries, not including Saudi Arabia, which had the most people who committed terrorist attacks. I think they had 11 of the 9/11 attackers, 9/11 terrorists. Saudi Arabia, they're not on this list. Why? Because Trump has business interests in Saudi Arabia.
Well, you know what I did find interesting about that one is that and I guess this could be interpreted one of two ways. There was one provision in there where they would actually set up safe zones in Syria for refugees who
That's resettlement, Mike. It's the same thing that Israel's been doing to Palestine.
Yeah.
It's resettlement.
So you think that would cause another Israel-Palestine situation in Syria?
Well, I mean, Syria is already destabilized enough, or what's left of it. But the point is that Trump, who at his inauguration said that he wants the U.S. he wants it to be America first.
Right.
He suggested non-interventionism, yet in that he doesn't want the U.S. to impose his will on other countries, or to impose its will on other countries.
Mm-hmm.
What does that sound like it's doing?
Yeah.
You're set. Oh, so you'll set up. We'll come in and we'll set up the refugee camps.
Yeah.
Okay. While we're bombing the shit out of the rebels with Russia.
Right.
Okay. It's total hypocrisy.
Another executive order that he signed, and this is where I'm like, this guy is a supervillain. Just because this next issue was so hotly contested, and it almost seemed like it started a civil war. The Dakota Access Pipeline, which was construction was shut down, and I'm not sure if they were in the process of rerouting it, but for probably the last 6 months of last year, I forgot the name of the company. It was a large oil company. They were trying to build a large pipeline from Canada down to the Gulf Coast, and it ran right through Native American reservation lands in North and South Dakota. And if this thing ruptured, it would have poisoned the drinking water of a lot of Native Americans who were supposed to live on protected land anyway. I'm sure you saw the protests. A lot of people checking in at Standing Rock. And, eventually what happened was they protested for so long that the construction permits lapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it looked like a victory. And people are saying, well, watch out for the Trump administration. He has interest in the companies that are involved in this. And lo and behold, today he signed an executive order giving the go-ahead for that and the Keystone Pipeline, which, when I say that it seems like he's just governing to be punitive and punish people who opposed him, this was the executive order that I was thinking of.
And he also still has had stock, and he also still has stock and business interests too. I know in Phillips 66, and also another company that that plans on using this pipeline. I can't remember the other one either.
Phillips
at the
66
moment.
Is that a subsidiary of 2 Corinthians?
No. That's Philippines.
Ah.
But point being, Trump was, of course, I mean, he's saying that he has this infrastructure plan. Technically, this is infrastructure.
Right.
He claims it's energy independence. He talked about an energy independence plan.
It's going to be built by all-American companies, which is a weird dystopian echo of FDR, but the opposite, if that makes sense.
Actually, I believe the contract went to a Canadian company, so that's another lie. The point being, and by the way, Canada is very happy that this is happening, and you're going to see Justin Trudeau strike a unlikely friendship with Trump over this.
He's going to kiss the ring like everyone has?
He will, and if anybody will, it's that guy.
Yeah.
This is my point, though. Trump says, "Oh well, we'll renegotiate. We'll possibly renegotiate where the pipeline's good." Do you believe that for a second that he's going to be interested in renegotiating anything?
I'd like to believe it, but
I'd like to believe it too. Just like he said that they're going to come up with a plan for Medicare for all, and Medicaid for all. Do you believe that?
I don't know enough.
I meant to say health care. I'm sorry. I'm spun around.
Yeah.
But he meant 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I meant to say health care. He planned on coming up with a health care plan for all in replacement of the Affordable Care Act. Do you really believe that's going to happen either?
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, you can say maybe, but what's the track record here?
Well, it depends. I mean,
he's already struck a 6-day track record that is incomprehensible.
Well, he's done a lot of the things that he said he would in his campaign. Hopefully, unfortunately, it's all been the worst things that he promised in his campaign. So maybe we're due for him keeping one of his positive promises. I don't know.
I mean, if so, that'd be welcome, but I can't imagine that's the way that it's going to break down. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. I really don't think that they have a replacement plan in place. Tom Price admitted as much in a Senate confirmation hearing that they don't have a plan in place yet, and that they're not really prepared to replace or overhaul the Affordable Care Act. I mean, we're looking at cartoonish villainy.
Right.
Like, you talk about him being a supervillain. That's what this is.
Right.
And the Republicans have crossed over into a territory of malevolence and cartoonish supervillainry. And you know what was a indicator that they would go in this direction at one point or another? They just go full bore. You look at what's been done to the schools, and Betsy DeVos is right now the most controversial of all the confirmations to the cabinet.
Right.
If anyone is at threat of not being confirmed, it's her.
Right.
Which let's all hope.
Right.
But she was a huge proponent of charter schools. Charter schools is destabilization of urban neighborhoods. It's segregation in action. It is squarely picking on schools filled with minorities, filled with low-income families, and in the process, further eroding their communities. Trump talks about the carnage in Chicago and how he's going to send in the feds to enact martial law. I don't know what the hell. Thankfully, Rahm Emanuel handled that better than I would.
How did Rahm Emanuel handle that?
Well, he spun it like, we could use help from the feds with after-school programs, with stopping guns from coming into the city. Like, he totally spun it into a liberal thing, a rare shining moment for Rahm Emanuel.
You know what? If there was a liberal savage enough to take down Trump, it would probably be Dead Fish Emanuel. That guy's ruthless.
He is, but he's also an idiot. But
that's what gets you elected these days.
Yeah, apparently. But he talks about the carnage in American cities and inner cities. You know what starts that carnage? When you take the foundation of a community and you blow it apart. And that's what Republicans have been doing for years with schools. In large swaths, 30, 40 schools get shut down in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Chicago. Where do you see the most crime?
Right.
Baltimore, south side of Chicago, east side of Detroit.
Yep.
Take a look at the state of the schools in those areas.
Yep.
Take a look how any sense of community, any sense of education and foundation, any sense of this foundation is just blown apart by programs like No Child Left Behind, proposed and pushed through by Republicans. Okay? If you look at the way that they gutted schools for children of color and how maliciously they did it, it doesn't surprise me that they've taken this full turn. And it doesn't surprise me that these politicians also get elected. Because at the end of it, Tristan and Grant, can talk a good game in Midtown, okay? But they're going to be sending their kid to some private academy because they don't want to send them to a public school.
Right.
Because the public schools now have the stigma because public schools have been so eroded in cities that there's no going back.
Right.
Okay?
You wrote them to the point where you're looking for an alternative.
Exactly.
You're looking for a way out.
Where there's nothing to do.
Right.
And you continue to cut funding, and you continue to see teachers be laid off. You continue to force children of color and families of color to send their kids to schools that they can't afford.
Right.
So what do they do next? They have to transfer from school to school to school. That kid's traumatized by that. That kid's destabilized by that. It's, Mike, the systemic issues started when Republicans started going after the schools. And it was a remnant of the big busing crisis back in the 70s where there were riots, almost riots in Boston and Detroit over black kids sharing buses with white kids. Okay? It started there. And it's continued on with charter schools. This is a major issue. And if you ever wanted to predict the malevolence, the moral bankruptcy of modern-day conservatism in the United States and racism in the United States, it's all traced back to what they've done to public education, the way that they've robbed children of color of education, of stability, of a foundation. And you wonder why they grow up and they go into gangs. They start selling drugs. They go into prostitution. But what do? You turn it back and you blame them for it, even though you're the fucking cause of it.
Right, the school-to-prison pipeline, right?
And guess who the white people are going to believe? The other white people.
Yeah.
And that right there was a sign to me that they're just morally bankrupt. There's nothing left of show me a good fucking Republican right now. John McCain right now is the closest thing, and maybe Lindsey Graham, and even them, they've had to do some ass kissing. They're voting yes at these Senate confirmation hearings. Marco Rubio eviscerates Rex Tillerson in a rare moment of integrity. And what does he do? Oh, well, I hope Rex Tillerson is the best.
Yeah, backs him.
Yeah. It's fucking disgusting. It really is.
Turn the radio off on the internet.
Turn the radio off. With Mike Parsons.
No drug dealers living next to me. Pretty good deal.
Kyle Bauer.
Yeah.
People hate my podcast.com.
That's right. I'm Mr. Bucket. I'm Mr. Bucket. Toss your balls in my top. I'm Mr. Bucket. Out of my mouth I will pop. I'm Mr. Bucket. Walk and run. I'm Mr. Bucket.
The game's Mr. Bucket. The first to get their balls into Mr. Bucket wins, but look out, because the balls will pop out of his mouth.
I'm Mr. Bucket. The balls pop out of my mouth. I'm Mr. Bucket. A ball is what I'm about. I'm Mr. Bucket.
So much fun. It's scary. Become a fan on Facebook at www.ttroshow.com. It's Turn the Radio Off.
There's been a couple of terms that have been getting on my nerves, and they've really been ratcheting up since Friday. First of all, I love all these people who you know, on Inauguration Day, they're like, well, I don't care if you supported somebody. It doesn't matter your political affiliation. We're inaugurating a new president today, and this day's for America, and we need to unite. And you know what I noticed about all the people posting that, Kyle? They were all Trump slappies.
Yep.
And, there's all these memes going around about how people need to stop whining. Look, don't tell people how to feel about certain things, okay? What's it to you? What's it to you if someone on your Facebook is happy or pissed about the president being elected or who won the election?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let people feel the way that they're going to feel.
Yeah, exactly. And also, it's no matter. It's kind of like the whole theme of this show. It's kind of like if we don't stand up for what we believe in individually and work on what we believe in individually, that's all we have, because the discourse has been shattered to the point where it goes nowhere.
Right.
We can only work for ourselves at this point.
Yeah.
And for our beliefs, because there's no point of even reaching out to the other side anymore. I mean, like I said, you got Democrats in Senate confirmation hearings appearing that they're trying to, and what's it getting us? It's only making the problem worse. That's where we're at right now. And that's why, no, I don't want to give him a chance. We gave him a chance. It hasn't even been a fucking week.
Right.
And look what's already happened.
I mean, look, he can redeem himself. I mean, there's still time, but
he's got a lot of work to do.
But he's not showing any evidence of that. I have.
He's in the most powerful office in the world. I mean, we can try to hold him accountable, but obviously no one in Washington wants to do that at this point.
And like I said, there may be nothing we can do until the midterm elections. But obviously, if you see something, say something, I guess, right? Don't be shy to cry foul if you think that he is acting in an unscrupulous way. And those are the only things you can do from now until the midterm elections. And once the midterm elections come around, then that's your chance to do something about it. But, stay vigilant. Try to stay objective. Try to rise above the noise and just concentrate on what's being done policy-wise and legislatively. And that's really all you can do.
It's going to be an exhausting 4 years.
Yeah.
Incredibly exhausting. It's been exhausting since, summer 2015 when this all started.
Yeah, and that's really when the election season started.
It's been exhausting since then, but I mean, it's only going to get worse.
Well,
and if it doesn't,
it might get better in 2 years.
If we relax, if we relent,
right,
and take the pressure off, it'll get worse and we'll just stop caring.
Right.
And that's my fear, is that people will get complacent, especially because I've made the prediction too, and he's only really hurting his own cause by what a raging maniac he's been so far.
Yeah.
Add in Spicer and Conway to that too.
Spicer, there's a snowflake. You want to talk about people protesting being snowflakes? That guy's a snowflake. Did you see? He was personally offended on Saturday when he was talking about the inauguration numbers. He was almost about to cry. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's too sensitive for this job. If he gets this upset about something so frivolous, he's not gonna last.
Or what about getting that upset about the popular vote when you won the
Right, who
Electoral
cares?
College anyway?
Who cares? You won. You got away with it. Go back to your Castle Grayskull and sign more executive orders.
Oh God! But the point being, if Trump, he has the possibility to have a good first year, to have a good 100 days. I feel like he's already squandered most of that opportunity, but I can say he at least had the chance,
right,
where he could win people over, in the middle, where he can retain his voter base,
right,
and add some to it. And doing that by, well, not building the wall, or at least delaying building the wall, would have been a good first step. Not maybe holding off on repealing the Affordable Care Act would have been a good second step. But there are a couple other things. The stock market right now is just swelling.
Yeah,
it's going nuts because there's this sense that lots and lots of deregulation is coming, maybe through some executive orders. And Trump has talked about this. With the stock market rising, the housing market's still good, unemployment numbers still good. The economy is lining up to be in good shape for at least the next year. If Trump would get his head out of his ass with all of his regressive policy and focus on actual infrastructure, he puts forward a massive infrastructure plan in place. The economy stays good. Hey, we're cruising through the first year. But no, instead him and the Republicans had to go full on supervillain, and look at where we're at now. I think he's already hurting himself.
I'm wondering. We really didn't talk a whole lot about the wall today. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. We know nothing except for the fact that it's going to cost somewhere between $8 and $14 billion, and that
real conservatism there.
Right. Well, you know what I'm wondering though? I'm wondering if this wall is going to be like Barack Obama's Guantanamo Bay, where Barack Obama, the first thing he wanted to do was close Guantanamo Bay. Was it the POW camp down there? And did he ever actually get that done?
No.
So
he didn't. He got it reduced down to, like, I think there's very few prisoners left.
Right, but it's still open.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things he said he wanted to do. So I'm wondering if that's what this is going to be as well. So
I would hope, but Mike, the difference then, and the difference between then and now is, there's no obstruction. There's a bunch of other bigots who have been campaigning on fear,
right,
and lies for the past 7 years, and this is where it's gotten us. There's not going to be enough obstruction to stop him.
Right. We do have to go. We'll be back next week, hopefully. If not, we'll be back in 2 weeks. It seems like if we don't do this weekly, Kyle, it's at least bi-monthly. So we'll talk to you when you talk to you. Thanks for listening, Paul. Bye.